3 months into my teaching career, I was attacked by a student.
Oh no.
And it wasn't like there was a student fight and I got hit. It was a student that specifically came after me.
Mm.
And in that moment, I was like, I don't think I can do this.
Welcome to Today in My Life, a podcast humanizing life, love, and laughter. Teaching has always been something that I've been interested in. This person who's going to be on the podcast today, I never would have saw as a teacher, but her being a teacher just kind of makes sense. So I'm your host, King Smith, and with me today is Katelyn Schoenhofer, also known as Miss Schoenhofer to her students. Katie, how's it going, lady?
It's going pretty good. How about you, King?
You know, we're ending 2020 here. I can't wait to turn the calendar and get to this next chapter of life. Thanks for joining my podcast. Now, you haven't always been a teacher, right?
No, this is a very new career for me.
Now, when and why did you decide to become a teacher?
Good question. So I started teaching 4 years ago. Before that, I worked for 8 years at an oil company, as a financial analyst, just dealing with numbers all day. And although it was something I was good at, it was not something that I really enjoyed because I am a people person. So I left to go work at the YMCA. And being a boss there, my primary employees were teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was firing teenagers left and right. And it was just because of a lack of skill, a lack of understanding how important it is to show up on time or how to interact with customers, basic reading and writing skills on report forms for important situations, when there was a potential drowning at a pool or whatever it was. And I realized that these kids just weren't being taught anything that they needed to be taught in a practical sense to be successful in the business world. So I looked into what's called a transition to teaching program and decided that I was going to go back and I was going to be that person that would teach kids how to be successful in the business world. So I switched to teaching and haven't turned back since.
Was there a cost for that transition to teaching for you, or was it something that was paid for?
It was all a cost to me. It was about $20,000 for the full program, I think.
Ooh, okay. So, um, for being a teacher, is there some type of like certifications or things that you had to have? And is there anything that you had already that helped do that transition to teaching?
So with this particular program, you have to have a degree, a bachelor's degree at least, in the field that you want to teach in. So with my marketing and business bachelor's and then my business administration master's, I was able to take what's called a praxis exam, which is essentially like verification that you know your content well enough to teach it to someone else. And then that allows you to get in the program and you teach on a restricted license for 2 years. And then after that 2 years, you do a capstone project through the state. And then they approve you for a professional license for teaching.
Okay. Now, hearing what you had talked about earlier, you had said that like that kids these days kind of lack the business sense. So is that what you wanted to go to like a school and just go, hey, so I have this business class idea and I think y'all should adopt it. Is that how that happened?
I wish that's how it would have initially started, but I guess thankfully, or, I wish I could have been more innovative, but the school that I went to is big enough. It's a 6A school, with about 2,200 students, and they have an entire business department with 6 different teachers. And so they already have classes like introduction to business, IT support, marketing, computer graphics, journalism, entrepreneurship, accounting. And so I just took over some of those classes that were already in place there. But this last year, we did incorporate a new class. It doesn't really fall into our business category, but I'll still be able to teach some business concepts within it because it's just who I am. But it's gaming concepts. It's teaching kids about esports, and then hopefully including some of the business side of esports too.
Whoa, whoa. Bring that back. So I'm 36. Now, I went to public school and we didn't have what I would consider like courses that prepped you for like the current market
Right.
and like the real world. We had like your general history and social sciences and,
Yep.
all that jazz. So this is a public school with a business department like focused
Yep.
area?
Yeah, a Title I school, Title I 6A school. And for those who don't know what Title I is, it means that the majority of kids are on free and reduced lunches. Um, but yes, we have an entire business department with over, I think, 30 different business courses and financial literacy, which is taught in the business department, is now required to graduate.
Nice. That's fantastic. Well, hey, tell me about that first day as a teacher solo, because if I understand it correct, like you'll have like a student teacher assignments where you'll have like, I don't know, somebody that you mentor or whatnot. But what was that first solo day like?
So it's funny to talk about that day because like you said, most people think you're a student teacher first and then you're a teacher by yourself solo. In the transition program, you don't ever do student teaching.
Ooh.
So I started school in June for my program, did two courses, and then come August, I was a teacher by myself with 220 plus students. So it's rough. It really is rough. I remember being so scared and so nervous because I know that teenagers, because I teach high school, and I know that teenagers are wonderful but also brutal all at the same
Hmm.
time. And going in on the first day, I don't know that I've ever drank so much water in my life. Like my mouth was dry, my heart was pounding. I was trying not to repeat myself, saying ers and ums, trying to come off as an authority figure because you don't want to start off a school year with kids thinking that you're scared. And I realized it's a lot about that, but it's also a lot about the kids looking for someone that cares about them. After my first class, when I realized that, when I showed the kids my excitement for being there, that I didn't have to be there. This wasn't just a career that I just finished college in, and it's what I have to do because that's what my degree is in right now. They were really receptive to the fact that I was there because I wanted to be there for them, not for me. And
Okay.
I didn't really have too many struggles that first day because the kids were really intrigued by me. And they were also intrigued by the fact that I had business experience. And so when I told them, this is my first year teaching, guys, I'm 26. I've been in the business world for way longer than most of your other teachers that are here. I can answer your questions. I can help you. I'm not here to just give you a test. I'm here to prepare you for life. And I think a lot of my kids were really receptive to that. And I made a really big, I don't know if it's a bold decision. I think for newer teachers, it's not as bold. For older teachers, it is to not have any formal tests in my class at all. In the 4 years I've been teaching, I haven't had any. And I think the kids were really shocked to hear that. I do projects instead, I do project-based learning. And the kids knowing that they weren't going to have to sit and memorize the definition of words, but they were going to have to be able to implement them, I think was intriguing for a lot of kids.
How has teaching been different than what you thought it would be prior to going into it?
Um, I did not ever realize that there would be so much bureaucracy and so many limitations on what we could truly do for the kids
Hmm.
based on ridiculous rules and so many rules that are made for one student that end up applying to all students. It just became a real big challenge to try and do these innovative, exciting things that I wanted to do because there were so many restrictions. Although there's so much talk about how we want teachers to do that, in some ways we can, but in a lot of ways we're bound by the rules that are set in place by the Department of Education and then by the schools themselves.
Has there ever been a time that you've gone, I don't know if I should continue to do this?
Uh, Only once. It was a very brief moment, surprisingly. I thought it would be a lot worse. 3 months into my teaching career, I was attacked by a student.
Oh no.
And it wasn't like there was a student fight and I got hit. It was a student that specifically came after me.
Mm,
And in that moment, I was like, I don't think I can do this. And I always thought, if a kid ever hits me, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna just beat him up. And I remember the first time when he first hit me, I just paused and I asked him why he did that. And I remember being very calm, but also very upset. And and then he proceeded to hit me again, and so I restrained him. And initially, right after it happened, I was very upset, very torn. I was like, maybe this isn't right for me. And it was more of how did I make a kid so upset that he was willing to do that? And not
hmm.
necessarily, I don't want to be around these kids anymore. But not too long after, when I sat down and thought about it, the only thing that I wanted to do was tell that kid that I forgave him and that it was okay, that we all make mistakes and he can learn from them. And the hardest part of my career was I wasn't allowed to do that. I didn't get any
Hmm.
more interaction with that kid. And it still breaks my heart to today because I don't know that he'll ever know that he gets to move on from that moment in his life. So that was really hard. And that bureaucracy again just made me really think about whether I could do the things that I wanted to do with the restraints that are put on teachers.
Got you. Got you. Oh man, I'm gonna go kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum from my last question. What was that first moment, all right, when you came out the classroom or you got home and you just smiled because something about that day made you hopeful?
There's so many. That's the only reason I think teachers do this because it's so hard, it's so time consuming, but those moments with your kids are just amazing. I think it would have to be, and it's kind of odd, I don't know. I had a young woman stay after class and ask to talk to me, and I had only been teaching for maybe 3 weeks at this point,
Okay.
and she confided in me everything that was going on in her life. The terrible things that were happening at home, why she was struggling in school, why she was failing every single class, and she just couldn't bring herself to do any of her work. And she had never told anyone really what was going on, but she trusted me enough to tell me and that she wanted to do better, she wanted to work on things, she wanted to make improvements. And unfortunately, as teachers, I hate to say unfortunately, but it is true. We're mandated reporters, and the system is completely broken as far as reporting and helping children. And so, of course, I had to report some of those aspects, but not everything. And so she still, even with that, was coming to my class every day, was coming into lunch to see me every single day, and we worked on her homework every day. She joined the cross country team so that she could be around me more, so that we could build that relationship. And she is a senior now, and she is a few months away from graduating and moving on to college. And it's just never something I
Nice.
thought would have happened. And so just the kids, just being there for the kids, that moment was so impactful to know that I can't change everybody's life, but if I can change one, I think that's all that matters.
Was there ever anyone that you grew up under, as far as teachers, that now that you're a teacher, you kind of go, you know what, I'm kind of like modeling myself after this person?
The school that I teach at is the school that I graduated from, and a lot of my coworkers were my teachers in high school. And so not only they hate that because it shows their age, of course, but they were amazing teachers. And it's really funny because I still can't call them by their first names because I have so much respect for them. And so I'm still saying Miss Blyde, Mr. Murphy, Miss Gates, even though I'm an adult and I'm their coworker and their peer, I still don't feel myself as their equal because I got to do so many incredible fun things in their class. It fostered my learning. It made me excited to be there every day. I loved skipping high school when I was younger because it was so easy. And I hated being there. I just felt like it was a waste of my time. And I know that a lot of my kids feel that way too. And these classes, I would come back to school just to go to these classes because of these teachers. And it was awesome how many I actually had, but you could always tell which teachers I liked and which teachers I didn't because I either had attendance or I didn't have attendance. And so I want to be that teacher just like they were, where I was excited to go see them and the content was kind of just secondary at that point.
You've been teaching for 4 years, and around March, we had this little thing called COVID hit. How did that impact you personally with teaching, and what are some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
I think so. In March, when our school shut down, our district is so large. We have 52,000 kids in our district. And I know that there are larger districts out there, but so large for our area that we decided as a district that we were not going to teach any new content to students. We were simply going to post information and work with them on their grades if grades were failing. So all my students who had A's, B's, C's, were done. They didn't have to go to school anymore if they didn't want to. And my students who were failing could work on their grades if they wanted to, and many didn't. So I went from
Hmm.
contacting 200 plus students a day and getting to interact with them and see their faces and hear them laughing. And it's all this stuff to maybe 15 students from March to May who interacted with me, who
Hmm.
sent me an email or turned in an assignment or did anything. And so I know for some teachers, it was like, well, I guess summer starts early. For me, it was a really big struggle because I missed them so much. And I knew that some of them are at home in unsafe environments. And I did 3 or 4 grocery runs for students. I individually brought gifts to students' houses just to see their faces and interact with them. I wrote over 200 cards and sent them out to seniors that I had had in the past and that I currently had, just because I wanted kids to still feel connected. So honestly, I felt like I worked more hours than I did during the school year because I was trying to come up with creative ways during COVID that I could make sure my kids knew they were still important. And so
Okay.
it was stressful. It sucked really bad.
It sounds like you're pretty cool teacher. When you go out in public now as a teacher, do you have students like coming up to you and saying hi, or speaking to you while you're out, and like how does that
Yeah,
feel?
so all the time. I have a student who I go to a particular fast food place so much that the student recognizes my voice when I order through the drive-through. That's pretty embarrassing. Um, but yeah, students recognize me constantly, and it's a mixed bag of feelings for me because I love that they want to
Hmm.
talk to me and they don't like, oh God, there's Miss Schoenhofer. Let's turn the other way and try and avoid her. I mean, they go out of their way to find me and to engage with me. And I'm so excited to see them and I want to see their faces and things like that. But it's it's also this really hard line with being a teacher. Like I've changed the way I behave in public. I've changed the way I dress in public. Because the last thing I want is to be wearing for instance, a low cut shirt and a student comes up to me and sees me in public and then their parents are there or something too. I just giving off that type of perception now kind of I've had to change a lot about myself in my personal life. And that's been really hard. So it's a mixed bag. Like I love to see them and it's so enjoyable to see them outside the classroom, but I'm also like, gosh, I can't fully live my life the same way that I did before I was a teacher. And I'm not sure how many
Hmm.
professions out there that are like that, where you have to worry every single moment about what you do outside of the classroom because you might have a little person watching you.
Um, how was your spouse supportive of your career change?
So initially, I made my career change from oil and then went to the YMCA, and it was only 6 months before I switched to teaching. And my spouse thought she's just never going to find a job that she's happy at. And so he thought I was just switching careers and, just bouncing around because I was just, I don't know, unhappy, bored, whatever you want to call it. And so he wasn't
Hmm.
all that supportive at first because he thought it was just the next big thing. Um, and so when I would come home and talk about my day and talk about everything that was going on, he would listen. He was understanding and caring, but it was kind of like, okay, how long is this going to last? And then after I had that monumental moment with the kid attacking me, and I came home and I was so emotional about wanting to go back to work, and I wasn't allowed to. I had to take the day off, and I could have gone back to work next day if I wanted to. But I think he realized it was something that I was truly passionate about. And so he was very supportive of my schooling, helping around the house, doing things. We don't have kids yet. And so there wasn't a lot of slack to like pick up with me being so busy. But he started to come to cross country meets when I was coaching, coming up to the school, working the games, coming to the concerts and the plays. And he didn't know any of these kids. I think maybe the hardest part for a spouse, or at least for mine, was I come home and I talk about my day and I talk about all these kids and all these things that are happening. And until you're a teacher, you don't really have a way to relate to that. And so it had to have been
Hmm.
so boring. It was so incredibly boring.
Hmm.
But something must have sparked excitement in him because he has gone back and he has become a teacher too.
No
So
kidding.
he started a transition to teaching program this year, but in special education. It takes a special kind of person to do special ed, and I'm not that person, but I think he is. And now, I mean, 90% of our life is spent talking about our children. And when I say our children, I mean our
Mhm.
200 plus kids or 400 between the two of us that we call our kids. And we learn their names, we interact with them at school, we talk about them at home. We go to sporting events. He's the announcer for the basketball games and for swimming. He's the esports coach. I'm the cross country coach and the gaming club sponsor. So, I mean, literally, our whole lives revolve around the school. It is a lifestyle change because it's 80% of what we do now. Like, even our free time is spent at the school doing extracurriculars with the kids.
That was my next question because it doesn't sound like it's 9 to 5 or 7 to 4 like it was in your previous job in the oil industry. It sounds like a good bit of your day is not only teaching but grading, lesson planning, doing the extracurricular activities that you volunteer to do, like coaching. What would you say is like your average time a week spent around education activities?
Um, 80 to 90 hours a week. Yeah, so you really have to break down like so we get in my school we get 82 minutes of plan time a day when we're remote. When we're in person, it's 82 minutes one day, 45 minutes the other day. And if you think I have 200 kids, maybe 150 at the least, but usually about 200, and they turn in two assignments a week, which it's way more than that. So you have to include all my lesson planning time, then all my time emailing parents and communicating with parents and students. And then if I'm grading 400 assignments a week, even if I only spent, 2 minutes on an assignment, which would be absolutely ridiculous because how am I supposed to give students proper feedback to let them know what they're learning and what they're doing? 2 minutes on those assignments, grading them. That would be over 13 hours a week grading. And I just don't think people realize the magnitude of the grading that we do. And I probably spend 5 to 6 minutes per assignment because I look at everything and I give the kids detailed typed out feedback of here's what you're not getting. Call me for a meeting. And then I send emails to parents and I call parents. And so, I mean, the fact that we get, I don't know, 200 and some odd minutes of plan time a week doesn't even come to cover it all.
I'd like to go back about something that it was just kind of sitting on my mind when you were talking about esports or
Mhm.
e-gaming. How did you get that approved? Because I hear stuff like, gaming and me being a gamer, I'm like, yes. You know, it doesn't sound like that
Yeah.
was something easy to like say, hey, so there's this thing out there that people are doing, and there can
Oh,
be a career in this. Like, let's get this, popping
yeah,
for
it
our
is.
kids.
I mean, you've got a 14-year-old who won a Fortnite competition who won millions of dollars. Like it's just an industry that some adults don't get, and it's so frustrating. It was hard. It was really hard. So I had started a gaming club where kids could come into my room during lunch, and we fundraised, we did bake sales, all those things, and we bought a projector, a Nintendo Switch, and some games. Because I would see kids sitting in the hallway like by themselves playing games on their phone, and they weren't talking to anybody, they weren't interacting with
Mm-hmm.
anybody, and I'm like, this is not right. So started up gaming club, and I have 80 kids in there during lunch. So my room is packed with kids playing Super Smash Brothers, screaming, interacting, just living their lives, having so much fun. And the principal started to notice because we have a restriction where freshmen and sophomores can't be upstairs, only juniors and seniors can, and my room is upstairs. And so I started having to hand out passes to allow these kids upstairs. And administration was noticing there were so many kids. And so they came upstairs and found them all in my room. And I mean, just this wonderful environment for kids they had never seen interact with other people before. And a lot of people think video games is just sitting in your
Hmm.
basement playing on a computer, but it's so much more than that. Um, so when my husband started, we found um, an organization called HSEL, and it's high school esports league. And we just put out feelers for kids that had their own computers, and we asked them if they wanted to get a team together. And we had an interest of like 200 kids. And we're like, holy moly, we were only expecting like 10. What do we do? So it turns out one of the colleges here has an esports team, and they have a gaming lab. And we got some corporate sponsorships that gave us enough money to rent out that gaming lab twice a week so that we could get kids up there to play. And we were grinding, working, doing all this stuff, getting our teams together. And we realized we had maybe some of the best talent in the region at our school, which was so cool. I don't know, for those of you who play video games, like for instance, our Rocket League, we have a grand champion on our Rocket League. And he's a season
Oh,
one grand
wow.
champion too, which means he was a grand champion at like age 11. And then we have, and I'm not very good with League of Legends, but with League of Legends and Overwatch, we have top tier players on all of these teams too. And so the first year we did this all, got organized with the local college. We were we were second place for regionals. And so our district started to
Nice.
take notice. We started to post things, they started to see our Facebook post, and the district called us and they're like, "Hey, we've been thinking about esports for a while. Can you kind of tell us what you're doing?" So we started to work with them. We started to show them the success that we've had. But the big challenge that we ran into is parents not wanting guns in the school.
Oh, yeah, because some of those
Right.
games
Like
have,
Overwatch,
that
Valorant, all of those do.
element to it.
And that was a hard battle to
Hmm.
fight. But there was a school here that we had already done it through an alternative program. And we were talking to them. And the argument that they give parents is like, you wouldn't hesitate to take your kid to see Star Wars. And Star Wars has the same types of guns, the same types of violence that the games we were going to be playing did. We don't play like Call of Duty, where it has like realistic blood and
Hmm.
guns and things, you know. And so we finally were able to push back that after a lot of pushback from parents. And then we got a lot of pushback about, well, I don't want my kid just sitting here playing video games all day being antisocial. So we started to invite parents onto our Discord, and they could listen to the comms during these games and the intelligent things that students are saying and the way they communicate and the way they problem solve. And they were just baffled because they didn't understand that that's what their students were doing. And so we've gotten a lot of supports from parents recently. And we finally got support from the district. The district got funding from the Board of Education, which was amazing. And we got us and four other high schools gaming computers in the actual schools. And this year we took 3 teams to regionals, and 2 of our teams are regional champions. Our League of Legends and our Overwatch teams are regional champions. And so we're the first school in the state
Nice.
to take a championship like that. And we're the school that's looked at as like the lower end school. When you tell people where I teach,
Mm-hmm.
they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry." And I'm always like, "I'm not. My kids are amazing. You just don't see it." I think it's been really, really good for these kids, and there's scholarship opportunities galore. We're not regulated by the state regulatory sporting association, so our kids can actually win money, cash. While like if you play basketball, you can't do that. So it's been really fantastic. And then they're incorporating now we have a class that we're going to run with it. We're going to teach kids how to do shoutcasting. We're including journalism in it. We're just trying to get the whole school involved in it because this is what kids want to do. 82% of teenagers play video games.
Are there any plans in the future to be more admin side of teaching, or do you prefer being the kind of boots on the ground, if you will?
It's going to be really hard for me, but that's a great question because I am working on my doctorate right now in educational leadership, and I will have a district license and a building license depending on what I want to do when I complete the program. But the goal is to work for the Department of Education and try and change some of these either state or federal restrictions and help empower schools and districts a little bit more. And then once some of those regulations are changed, I'd like to go back down to the district level and be closer to boots on the ground, but more with maybe curriculum development or developing standards, items like that, in order to change what teachers are required to do in the classroom. It would be
Okay.
hard to step away
All
from my
right.
students, but knowing that maybe I could impact millions of students' lives versus just a couple hundred, I think would be the drive for me to do that.
We're going to end this podcast like this. Looking back, what would you tell yourself in your first year of teaching that you know now that you would like to say to yourself to prepare yourself for what's to
Hmm,
come?
that's so tough. I don't know. Maybe something as simple as don't try and reinvent the wheel right away. Because I think that I went in a little too gung ho on everything that I wanted to do, and I could have been a much more successful teacher,
That
knowing that let's just take somebody else's plans right now the first year and use those and then modify those instead of making your own from scratch. And I think maybe I'd be a little bit further along in how I want my plans to be developed. Because even 4 years in, I'm still making plans and changing things all the time. And I think if I would have started slower, I definitely would have been more productive once I understood a little bit more about teaching. And so I think a lot of first year teachers would really think about that too.
All right. Well, that sounds pretty solid. Katie, soon to be Dr. Schoenhofer. Thank you for joining Today in My Life. Okay, so these are my unfiltered thoughts after I do the editing for the podcast and publish them. So, I was born in the wrong era. Let me just start there. Growing up, I would always hear all the time from my mom, gaming don't pay the bills. Wrong. There are sports teams, people getting sponsored. If you go to Twitch and some of these other streaming platforms, Facebook gaming, you have people that can make a decent living from gaming. And there's also business principles and life skills that I think that you can learn from gaming. For example, playing a game like Call of Duty or Fortnite or other squad or team based games require you to communicate with other people, formulate a strategy, and execute things that you do in a real life job. My daughter, who is 13, has been playing Roblox since she was about 7. And I let her do it and actually enjoyed her doing it because there's different things or gaming elements inside of Roblox. You can own a restaurant where you have to set the salary, set the prices, build and design the restaurant to be efficient to get out orders and things like that. There are city builders, other various little activities and things inside of there that you can keep track of your expenses and income and earn a job. And I was so fascinated hearing my daughter explain to me the different things that she had going on in there without her even knowing really what she was doing. She was telling me how to run a business. She was talking about the stuff that she has to consider to try to get the best profit out of her business from a video game. Me being a gamer myself, I understand the value in that. I encourage it, and I'm glad to see that some areas around our US are starting to integrate that into their education school system. Outside of that, I don't know how I would have reacted had someone ran up on me and hit me. I always like to think that, I mean, I'm a pretty strong guy and that somebody wouldn't have the audacity to try me. But with some people, you just never know. With that being said, thanks for tuning in to this bonus footage on Today in My Life, and stay tuned for future episodes.